Hello, I'm EVM and welcome back. Now, this house I'm in right now, we've been in for, I think, just over 7 years now. And when we first moved in, we had a plan to reduce the impact that this house had environmentally as much as possible. And if I'm being brutally honest with myself, to make it as cheap to run as possible as well, because typically when you make something more efficient, it saves you money as well. The payback period might be short, it might be a no-brainer, or it might be very long. But ultimately, this is a house we're going to spend most of our time in, our forever house, if you will. So if we're ever going to put that sort of level of money or investment into a house, this is the one to do it in. So we have done. We're about, I would say, 2/3 of the way through this grand master plan, as it were. And I thought I'd just show you what we've done so far, because we've got, as you can see here, we've got a home battery system, the Give Energy system, solar panels, sorted out the insulation, lighting system, that's the smart one now, smart heating system, all the usual stuff and a few extras. I'm just going to show you around now and show you what we've done and what impact it's actually had for us, financially as well as environmentally. Now, the first thing that we wanted to do or decided to do after we did move in, which obviously we were pretty skint at the time, we just moved house, wasn't things like this, where you generate your own electricity or store it. For me, the first thing that should happen is reducing the amount you use before you start generating your own. We have a gas central heating boiler that does the hot water and heating. Everything else in the house is electric, and that may change in the future. I will come back to that boiler later on. But the first thing that we did is to try and reduce the amount of, well, electricity and gas we used for both the heating, the lighting, and just stuff in general. So that's where we're going to start, upstairs in this case. Now, when we moved in, the first thing we noticed was the insulation, or should I say, almost total lack of insulation. So that's the first thing we had to do. Bit of a backstory. We bought this house as a semi-repossession, as it were, because the builders that built these went bust just before they were completed. They were never sold, so they were sat empty for several years before we came along and bought them, which meant certain things weren't finalised, things like insulation, you know, the very final fix stuff. So that was the first job, because no insulation at all, even in a relatively new house, you just lose heat. I mean, a massive heat sink. Now, I think it's fair to say that the majority of people have already done this, so it's a bit of a no-brainer. You can see there we've sorted the insulation out, and in here we've boarded up this, as well as having a big thick layer of insulation as well. You can tell how professional I am. I'm using Christmas lights that flash as lighting in this loft. I managed to get hold of a thermal camera about a year after we did the insulation, and that highlighted a few cold spots, as it were, as you can see right here in this picture. So what I did is bit more insulation, spread it out a bit, made a few changes effectively up there, and I'll put them side by side now. That did as well as you could probably do in this house. I mean, there's not much more we can do up there in terms of insulation, but again, reduces the amount of loss, therefore the efficiency goes up, the money savings also go up. A lot of people, I don't think, have ever looked to see if it's good enough. I mean, yeah, you've got insulation, but is it enough insulation? Can you make it better? Whilst we're on the subject of the thermal camera, actually, the one thing that I did is point it towards the massive heatsink in the house, which is the garage doors. We have 2 of them, and they just lost a ton of energy, as you can see from this image here. I mean, it was effectively just an up and over door. There was a 1 centimetre gap around the edges, and heat just flew out the house. These houses are 3-storey high. The garages are underneath. So effectively the heat gets drawn, even though they're insulated, they get drawn from the house above and gets flown straight out the garage door. These have been replaced, of course, clearly. So one big thing that I wanted to do, partly for security, was to replace these, well, replace the ones that were before it from that imaging with these. So these are nicely, fully insulated doors, nice and secure, no gaps around the edges, and that has made a massive difference to the amount of heat loss, not just from the garages themselves, but that was drawn from the house that then disappeared out of there. Now, it's one thing reducing the amount of heat lost from the house, but the one thing I noticed is that we were heating rooms up that didn't need to be heated. Even fettling the TRVs on the radiators, you know, where you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do that every day for months on end, and it still would never get it right. One room would be too hot whilst the other one would be too cold, and then you get that room sorted out, and then that one would be too cold or hot. It never was efficient as it could be. So you can see the gas boiler there behind this immensely brilliant Twizy. So I thought, well, let's make this more efficient now. Now this is a little bit of an investment, which I reckon, after the calculations I've done over the couple of years I've had this system, will probably pay itself back after 2 or 3, well, in fact no, I'll say 3 to 4 years. And I should point out that everything I've bought in this system, I've bought when it was on ridiculously good offers, less than half price. I think £27 per radiator is the average, just to give you an idea. Now let's start with the obvious. Again, something that I think a lot of people are familiar with, a smart thermostat, but I've expanded on this. This is the TADO system that communicates with the boiler downstairs, tells it when to turn on or off based on the temperature that you can set. It's off at the moment because it's summer, and this is wired in, so I can take it off like that. And this is something I installed myself using the instructions that were specific to the one it replaced from TADO. Very easy, took me about 15 minutes, and it's been faultless for the past, well, 2 or 3 years that I've had it. So that is one part of the puzzle, but this for me is the key and why I chose the TADO system over anything else. This is the bathroom, as you can tell from the echo, but all the radiators in all of the main rooms have one of these on them. It's a thermostatic radiator valve, effectively, and what that does is automatically turn off the valve, so off, on, off, on. I can set anything to any temperature I wish, at any time of day I wish, on a schedule, so I can have it at 17 degrees in the morning, and then 19 degrees in the afternoon, and then 17 degrees in the afternoon. You can literally do anything you like for any room, and it's really nice and configurable. More on that in a second. So for example, if I open the app up, you can see I have lots of rooms here. It means that only the rooms that call for heat get heat. So let me give you an example. I'm in the bathroom. I will put it up to a ridiculous temperature just to kick it in. That has now just turned on. I don't know if you can quite make it out on camera there. I've just heard it going zzz, so it's opened the valve up. That will then send a signal to the thermostat that I showed you in the hall, which sends a signal to the boiler to turn on. So right now the boiler is turning on, it's generating heat for the radiator system, but only this radiator is going to get that heat because all the other radiators are turned off. Unless they're below the temperature I've set it to for that particular time of day, only this will get the heat. So the boiler doesn't have to work as hard, it doesn't have to heat as much stuff up because only one radiator is calling for heat, only one gets it. After, I will say, it takes a couple of months of fettling to get them just how you want them. I haven't touched them now for about 18 months. It's been sweet as a nut, brilliant, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. For example, my wife works nights sometimes, which means she's in bed during the day. So all you do is set it on there, or you can turn it on here as well. I can adjust the temperature manually or on your phone. You don't need to do it on a device. So she can set that so it's a cool temperature through the day. It doesn't cool anything down, of course, but it stops the heating coming on in that room. So me and my daughter, for example, if we're at home on a weekend, we will get up, the dining room, the living room will be a nice temperature, especially in winter, but the bedroom where she's in bed will be off. It will be at the same temperature it was at night. So it gives you a lot of convenience, a hell of a lot of comfort, and for that alone it's worth it. But I do like the fact now that only this radiator would be getting heat because only this radiator called for heat. Anytime me and my wife are out of the house, it puts the system into away mode. So all the radiators go to a lower temperature, and then as we're coming back from home, it turns them back on to whatever temperature we've set them to, and it heats the house up so it's warm for when we get into the door, as opposed to when you walk in the door and then turn it on. It's brilliant, I have to say, it's absolutely brilliant, and reduces the amount of gas we consume and the amount of money we spend on gas, which is ultimately the goal. We're using less than we were before. Now it's the lighting system, and as always, I've gone overboard with what I've put in. But it does save energy, and it's quite smart, geeky, cool at the same time. I should point out that anything with the word smart home on it, I have to stop myself from getting. I just have to have it. Genuinely, I had to get stopped by my beautiful wife when I nearly, and I mean nearly, bought a smart rice cooker. Yeah, that's the world I live in. But yes, in terms of the light, when we moved in, we noticed we had a lot of spotlights, as you can tell there. I mean, there are 4 in the hall here. There are 6 in that kitchen. We've got 2 in there. There's probably about 23, 24, something like that in the whole house. And they were all halogen, some 35 watts, some 50. In the kitchen, for example, 6 spotlights, 35 watt each. That means just to light that room, 210 watts. Clearly, the thing to do was to replace them with LEDs, which is what I did. But again, didn't just put normal LEDs in. I had to go for the overkill, the Philips Hue system. Now, like the Tado ones, I only bought these when they were on ridiculously special offer, so they were a lot cheaper than if you just go on Amazon now. And the one thing that kind of made it key to me, the thing that appealed to me, was this up here. I've got several of them. It's a sensor, you can just see right there, because it means that not only when you walk into a room, the light turns on. That's fairly common, that's not unusual, but you can set it so after a certain period of time, so in this hallway, it's just a traffic area, after a minute they turn back off again, assuming there's no movement. In the kitchen, I say to 15 minutes. I've only put it in the traffic areas. There's no point in putting it in bedrooms and living rooms and things like that, because you sat still and it turns off when you're not moving. But ultimately, it means that nobody can leave a light on in almost any room, which is brilliant. I mean, it does rob me of that dad thing, and I know any dad watching this will know exactly what I'm talking about now. Do you know when you walk past, let's say, the kitchen, and you won't say, "Who's left the light on in the kitchen?" You won't do that as a dad, will you? What you'll do is make up a stupid analogy. Well, it appears that you two are playing in the kitchen tonight, because that's the only reason I can think of for all the lights to be on. I mean, why do we do that? Why do dads do that? It's just a thing. So it has robbed me of that, but it means that they're more efficient. They're using less electricity because they can't be left on. Yeah, now you're thinking, well, hang on a minute. I could have just got cheap LEDs, and even if they're left on overnight, which quite frankly in a lot of rooms there were frequently, it wouldn't use a lot of energy, would it? LEDs use a very small amount. I mean, we've gone from 210 watts in there to, I would say, probably, I don't know, about 80, probably less, 70, 80. Now, I have done the calculations on this based on roughly how long they were left on, which sometimes was all day and all night as well. But even just averaging out, I figured out that with the money I've spent on the Hue system, I'll get my money back after 97.5 years. That's man maths for you. But you know what? It's not just about the savings, is it? Sometimes you just like geek stuff. I mean, seriously, if you could get automatic doors, you can tell I grew up in the Star Trek Next Generation area. If you could get a door that went pss, pss, when you walked up to it and went through it, just like in Star Trek, I would get that, absolutely. Now on to some more interesting stuff. This is the inverter for my Give Energy battery system. It's also the inverter for the solar panels. It's a hybrid inverter. There's a lot that this can do, but if you want to know more about this in detail, especially the financials behind it, I've done 2 videos specifically about that. They will be linked in the description below. So I don't want to go through all that in this specific video. This is just a very brief overview. Go and watch that if you want to know the details. Effectively, what this means is that everything I generate from the solar panels will either be used by the house or stored in this, which means during the sunnier months, sunnier days, should I say, and months, I guess, I can generate more than the house uses. It then gets stored in here to the point where it gets full. And then there's enough in this 8 kilowatt hour battery to see me through the rest of the evening and night until the sun comes out again the next day. So effectively, again, during the summer months, I'm solar powered. The house is solar powered, excluding the car charging, of course. So yes, some days we've got so much solar energy coming in that this is full, and then we've got quite a few hours of export, unless I divert some of it into the Twizy or the other EV, of course. But effectively, concentrating on the house, ignoring all that, I would say 3, maybe 4 months of the year, we're generating enough solar energy to tick us through the night. Some of those, especially in North Yorkshire, it's quite grey. We do have to top it up for maybe half an hour, maybe an hour during the night. And I'm on a nighttime cheap tariff. So effectively, I charge this up at night and it's cheap and it uses the electricity during the day. I'm getting cheap electricity all the time. So even when I do have to rely on the grid, it's only from the cheap nighttime rate, even though I'm using it during the expensive period through the day. The price of gas and electricity is going up, gas especially, a lot. I mean, it's skyrocketed. So the more electricity goes up, I guess the quicker this pays itself back. So it's quite difficult to guess, but if you do want to know the specifics about this and the panels, I've done videos about it. So I can tell you about this and all the financials behind it in those videos. So have a look in the description below this video and link to that. I don't want to go through it all in this video. That's a more in-depth discussion. But ultimately, this has made a huge, huge difference to the bills and, of course, our impact. Not only are we generating our own electricity, but we're typically only really taking energy from the grid when it's nighttime, which is when it's the greenest. Typically, it's when it's the cheapest. It's when the grid wants us to use it. The solar panels, not exactly optimal though. I have an east-west array because that's the shape of the roof. I can't change that. We have 4 panels on the east side, 10 on the west side. There's literally no more we can fit up there, and that's 310 watt per panel. So it's far from optimal. We haven't got a huge array compared to a lot of people out there, and again, that's the biggest we can physically fit up there. So even in the middle of winter when there's very little solar, I can guarantee that most, if not all, of the energy comes from the cheap periods. And that kind of leads me back to that gas central heating boiler. Replacing that and getting rid of gas entirely. Getting rid of the gas meter, so that standing charge doesn't exist. And the only real solution I can think of, and I could do with your help on this one again, air source heat pump. It's efficient. Gas is going up again, as I said, a lot in cost. So therefore, I reckon with this system, i.e. all the electricity comes from either the sun or a cheap nighttime tariff rate, and a storage tank, you know, a nice efficient one, I'm pretty sure an air source heat pump would get me to the point where I wouldn't spend any more on heating the house than I do now. Even though they're more efficient, electricity is a lot more expensive than gas. So financially, just from that point alone, it never makes that much sense. We're probably looking at £10,000–11,000 for an air source heat pump for this house as a kind of researched rough guesstimate, which is a hell of a lot of money. From what I've been told, the RHI grant, which is still in place for now, I will get about £5,500 back from that over 7 years. So we're looking at, what, £5,000 to £6,000 long term for a cost for an air source heat pump for me, for my house. If that means that I even save a little bit of money, it's never really going to make sense, is it, financially? Purely from a financial point of view, I'm not going to save money by getting an air source heat pump. But you never know. Who knows where gas will go? There may be bigger incentives coming up. The government seem to be wanting to push these a lot. It's not all about that though, is it? A lot of people, me included, to a level, you know, I am realistic here. I'm not an environmentalist, but I do want to do it to get rid of gas completely. I quite like that thought. But then, even long term, £5,000 or £6,000 is a lot of money. Now, of course, I have an electric vehicle. It's in the garage over there. That uses more electricity than the house. But even that can be made more efficient. This here is my car charger for this. It's a smart home charger, and they all have to be smart chargers now, and I've done for a good year or so, which means that they can be controlled. And that, again, it's all about control and integration. Not just for these, but for the home battery system, for your lighting system, for your heating system. This only charges this, or anything else that I've got plugged into it at the time, when it is cheapest, when the grid wants me to, effectively. I can tell it to charge when the grid is the greenest, not necessarily the cheapest, or I can just say, pick the cheapest times please, and then put the amount of energy I want into the car that I specify. So it's all about control. So again, even though the car uses an awful lot of electricity, and this is something that people bring up a lot on the comment section, and the Daily Mail makes a big deal of it. We're going to need loads of power stations if everyone goes EV. We're going to need a bit more, and there's a few local grid upgrades, but that's it. I only charge my car at night time when there's a ton of extra capacity that nobody's using. And that's because it's cheaper. That's why we have smart meters going into people's houses. So then time of day tariff will come into play. People will be used to it. They will use electricity when it's cheapest as opposed to when it's more convenient. I plug this in when I get home from work at night. Well, in the evening really. But it doesn't start charging until I think it's 2:30 in the morning when the cheap rate kicks in, when the grid wants me to. That's why ultimately it's not going to have this massive effect. Don't look at an electric car and go, wow, we need to generate now that were not before. The grid is generating this much. We only use this much at night. So if everybody charges their electric vehicle at night, loads of capacity. Again, that's a simplified way of looking at it, but that's effectively how it is. People will pick nighttime charging because it's at a third of the cost, typically anyway, is for me, 5p per kilowatt hour. Which is why, on average, I do 1,000 miles of fuel costs for this for £13.50. Sorry, got a little off track there, but yes, again, it's all about integration. I can charge this up when it's cheapest, I can charge my home battery up when it's cheapest, and that makes a huge difference, not just for the grid, but for my wallet and the environmental impact. So you might not have to install anything in your house, you might just have to change when it's plugged in. Like people who, I don't know, do the washing or the tumble drying or something like that, do that at night, and then the electricity is greener at night, it's cheaper at night if you're on the right tariff. You don't have to have a big electric vehicle or a home battery system to benefit from it or to help things. You can reduce the impact just by changing your routine. Right, we're done. That's it, that's the house, that's everything we've done so far and what we're planning to do in future. If you've got any ideas, not just for my house, is anything that you've done in yours that you thought, oh, this is quite cool, this has saved us some money, or it's just quite geeky. Yeah, I'm interested in geeky stuff, smart home stuff. Then let me know. Please do use the comments. That's it. Our energy bills are far, far lower than they were when we moved in. Significantly so. I mean, don't get me wrong, especially with the solar panels and the battery, we spent a lot of money. But everything that we have done, bar maybe the garage doors, it will end up saving us more than it initially cost us. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Please do subscribe. For more of these, I will do another video at some point in the future about the home and probably battery related. I'd like to do something with that in the near future or coming up over the year. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.